Okay, in this video, I'm going to be discussing the conservation of the great white shark. And I'm not going to go through the whole process of how we became the first country in the world to protect the great white shark. Our team were the first people. We got the great white shark protected in April of 1991, and we made history, world history, because we were the first country in the world to protect the great white shark, and it was our team that did this. And it wasn't only about protecting the great white shark. The fantastic thing about this protection that we managed to get legislated here in South Africa is that, well, I'm not in South Africa at the moment, I'm actually in Sweden, but legislated in South Africa is that we could use the great white shark, because it's such a sexy animal, as a battering ram for the conservation of other shark species. And the most influential person behind having the great white shark protected was actually my father, Theo Ferreira, but there were more people involved. It was a teamwork. It was my father, Theo, Len Compagno, Dr. Len Compagno, one of my bosses, Nan Rice from the Dolphin Action Protection Group, a good friend of mine, PJ van der Walt, who was also part of helping us campaign. Chris Feller, no, he wasn't there at that point, but Mike Hughes, my sisters Tracy and Cherie, my mom got involved. There was a large team of us, employed and volunteers, that worked hard. Mike Boone, in getting the great white shark protected. Now, I don't want to focus only, I want to make it very clear now that people ask me all the time, why is it important to protect the great white shark? Well, it's important to protect the great white shark because it's an apex predator. It's like, sorry, I mustn't touch the mic, it makes a noise. It's like saying to me, why is it important to protect lions? Why is it important to protect tigers? Why is it important to protect leopards? They have a very specific and important function in the environments that they live, because these are apex predators. Excuse me. It's the same as saying, well, whatever. You need apex predators. I mean, I'm in Sweden right now, and I'm disgusted in Sweden's laws when it comes to hunting, and especially the wolves. Now, every year, they've got to go out into hunters go out into the forests in the summer months, and they shoot tens of thousands of moose and deer, hundreds of thousands of deer, and they shoot 60,000 foxes every year. And the reason is because there are no wolves, no top predators in the environment. It's not a national environment anymore. And the same with the great white sharks. Great white sharks need protection because they are top predators, and they have a very significant impact on their prey spectrum, which is this pyramid effect. But what I want to say is, it's not just the great white shark. People ask me all the time, the great white shark needs protection, or why do we need to protect the great white shark? We have to save the great white shark. But it's not just the great white shark. In fact, when it comes to numbers, I would say that the great white shark, compared to many, many other shark species, is in good standing. The problem out there is that there are hundreds of shark species that have been targeted for different fisheries. And unfortunately, their numbers are dwindling, all of them. I mean, blue sharks, just in the Northeast Atlantic, blue sharks, bald beagle sharks, mako sharks, all their population is down to 10% of what it should be. So they've plummeted by 90%. And I'm just talking about several species. Along our coastline, just to give an example, the Supin sharks and the smoothhound sharks, which are caught commercially along our coastline and then exported to Australia to be turned into fish and chips, their numbers are down 90%. I would say at least 90%. I haven't looked at the latest stats, but at least 90%. So many of the shark populations are on the brink of collapse. So it's not only about the great white shark. The great white shark cannot live in an empty kitchen. If the kitchen is empty, there's no food in those cupboards, the great white shark will die. And it's the same with the ocean. We have to protect the ocean as a whole, reefs as a whole, reef systems as a whole. You can't just protect one animal and then forget about all the other animals. And that is what I'm saying to you now when it comes to shark conservation. And just to put it into perspective, right now, we are removing about 100 million tons of biomass from the oceans every year. At least 100 million tons of biomass every single year. And that is the equivalent weight to approximately 2,500 nuclear aircraft carriers. Now imagine putting 2,500 nuclear aircraft carriers together. You'd have something the size of a country, or maybe even bigger than some countries. It'd be massive. And 30% of the biomass which is removed from the oceans is dumped as bycatch. So 30 million tons, and this also includes a lot of shark species, are dumped back into the oceans dead as bycatch. So we got serious problems when it comes to the oceans and conservation. I can go on and on and on and on about this. There's so much information. But the main thing is that we can't turn the great white shark into the holy grail and forget about all the other shark species. But because this is a series on the great white shark, I'm going to bring my attention back to the great white shark specifically. Now, the reason these animals are in danger is because they occur close to shore. They're inshore predators. So they're very much affected by human interference in different ways. First of all, they're easy to, if you know where to go and find them, they're easy to find, they're easy to catch and kill. Since they've been protected, their jaws have become very valuable, and there's a thriving poaching trade taking place in South Africa, and it's probably in different parts of the world, where great white sharks are caught and just for their jaws, and their jaws sell for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. The most expensive jaw sold in South Africa was sold for 80,000 pounds, British pounds. At that time, it was over $100,000. It was probably about $120,000. That is what a 6-meter great white shark's jaw sold for. So you can imagine the attraction by ruthless poachers when it comes to killing these animals for their jaws. Their fins are also very valuable. So the fins on the great white sharks have got very large fins, and the fins are chopped off. So these animals are poached, they're caught illegally, jaws are removed, fins are chopped off, and the fins are sold to mostly to China. And these idiots think that it's going to make their little wieners bigger, and it doesn't. Shark fins are cartilage basically, and it's tasteless. And the way they make it taste like anything is by adding chicken stock to it. So it's a ludicrous, disgusting, and cruel activity. And it's not just a great white shark. Millions, tens of millions of sharks are caught each year on the oceans. Their fins are chopped off, and the carcass of the shark is just dumped back into the water. And the reason being is because these large ships that go out there, these big factory ships that go out there, they don't want to fill up their holds with sharks that are worth maybe, say, $3 a pound. Just as an example, when they can rather fill their holds up with tuna, which is worth $300 a pound or $30 a pound or whatever it may be. So they chop the fins off because the fins take up very little space. It's like 5% of the shark's mass. And they just throw it into the bottom of their freezers, and they sell these fins for enormous profits, enormous prices. So those are two reasons why the great white shark has got problems when it comes to conservation. It's poaching, for the fins, it's poaching for the jaws and the fins. So that is one of the problems. The other problem is, as I mentioned, they're inshore predators. So they occur close to the coastline, and therefore we have an influence on them by fishing. They often get hooked. I'm not saying they get purposely hooked, but many great white sharks get hooked and accidentally because they come up near a boat and somebody has hooked a fish or a shark and they bring it in, and the great white shark naturally comes up and grabs the fish off the line or on the line and ends up with a hook in his throat or hook in his mouth. A hook tearing across the gills can kill a great white shark. If the hook goes into the top palate, into the roof of the mouth, it can create terrible infection which can actually kill the great white shark. So that's another problem. Then we got habitat degradation. So let's look at Mossel Bay. I've been talking about Mossel Bay very often. But every bay in the world where you find great white sharks, you also got boats going out there fishing, and they're throwing their anchors down onto the reefs, and the anchor chains drag across the reefs, and the anchors rip the reefs apart. They catch the fishermen take the fish that are on the reefs, and they decimate and the reef system, where the shark is supposed to be feeding, where the great white shark, especially the younger ones, are going to be feeding. So we wreck the system completely. It's habitat degradation. And we do this by building harbors. We do this by building jetties out into the ocean, which create sand shifts and silting. Whoops, I just almost knocked my shark off the table. Sand shifts and also silting up of reefs. We pump in effluents into the water. It's just a lot of habitat degradation. So if you're ruining this animal's home, it can't function there. It's got to be able to function in its home without being interfered with constantly by human beings. If you're living in a house like this, if I'm living in this house of mine in Sweden, and people are constantly walking in and out and just taking things out of my fridge and my cupboards and taking my lights and using my electricity, etc., eventually this place will become unlivable. And that is exactly the same for the great white shark in its natural environment. We are making its environment unlivable for the species. So it's habitat degradation. That's the other problem. Long lining. Long lining is also a very big problem, but that goes back to fishing. But long lining, and this is not poaching great white sharks, long liners go out there and in South Africa and other parts of the world, long liners are allowed to fish inshore in the bays and that, and they specifically targeting certain species. Like in South Africa, we've got 5 long lining fishing boats that are licensed to operate along our coastline. And they come inshore and they lay kilometers of line with hundreds and thousands of hooks on these lines, specifically to catch certain species of shark. But now these sharks come along, which makes up a very important part of the great white shark's diet. They take the bait, they get hooked, they start struggling. This attracts the great white shark in. The great white shark comes along, especially the younger great white sharks, grabs the smaller shark species, and that great white shark gets entangled in the long line or gets hooked and dies on the long line. And these long liners bring these sharks in. They're not allowed to land the great white shark. So what they do, they chop the fins off. They probably take the jaws out because they know the jaws are valuable. They hide it away. And then they just dump these great white sharks at sea. So those are some of the serious issues we're facing when it comes to great white shark conservation. Habitat degradation, destroying long lining, and poaching. Those are the main reasons that we are potentially going to lose the great white shark and a complete collapse of many marine systems out there. And we talk about it all the time, and you see it on TV and you hear in the documentaries, but nobody takes it seriously. We got a serious problem when it comes to the habitat of our oceans. These animals are struggling out there. We're just making it impossible for them to live out there in peace. So the great white shark is protected, yes, and therefore it's in good standing compared to many other shark species. But we need to start protecting entire bays. We need to start protecting entire reef systems. Where great white sharks exist, we need to protect the bay, or half the bay, or depending on how large the area is. But we need to protect large areas where these animals can actually find their natural prey. The natural prey that they feed on is not being interfered with by fishermen, and the reefs where the animals, the prey is living on, their environment is not being destroyed by fishing boats and hooks and lines and overfishing and all the rest of it. And then the other enemy of the great white shark is unfortunately just public perception. Most people still believe that the great white shark is this man-eating monster. And it's not a man-eating monster. The great white shark is a beautiful animal. It's just a predator. It's just a large shark out in the ocean doing its best to survive and fulfill an extremely important role. And we need to protect this animal and its environment that it lives in, and that means protection of the entire environment. Thanks very much.